What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to TCG Madness. My name is Philip, and today we are doing another deck build for Altered TCG. This is Rin Orchid plant-based tribal deck, and I'm really excited to talk about this deck with you. Now, before we go any forward, if you guys could just do me the really big favor right now, please hit that like button. If you're new, consider hitting that subscribe button, and don't forget to also comment down below if you guys agree or disagree with anything that I do with these decks. If you guys think that the build is not right, if you guys think I missed maybe a couple of cards, maybe things that maybe you would do it a little bit differently, please comment all that down below. I love hearing from you guys. I don't take offense to any of that. Again, when I build decks and I put it out there for you guys, I know good and well maybe it's not the best deck, maybe it's a fun deck, maybe it's not the most competitive deck or anything like that, but again, there are always different builds, because that is the beauty of deck building, and that is the beauty of Altered TCG. There are a bunch of different routes that you can go with your deck. This will be the last Muna hero that we build before we go dive into Yasmir. So I'm really excited to look over this deck build with you, and then we're going to get out of the Muna faction, then we're going to jump into Yasmir. So this deck build is Rin Orchid. Again, if you guys want to pause right now, take a good look at the screen, see what the deck looks like right now before I go into a deep dive into the deck. I'll go over each card, why I put it in the deck, then I'll go ahead and dive into the statistics of the deck, and then instead of doing examples of unique cards, what I'm actually going to do a little bit differently is I'm actually going to show you guys at least 10 cards that I think you should sideboard with this deck if you maybe want to go a little bit of a different route, or maybe some things that I thought like, hey, I want to squeeze this in there, but I don't know what I should take out of this current build. So I went and go ahead and sideboard these cards for you. And I think if you want to manipulate the deck a little bit to meet your needs, these are the cards that I would sideboard. Also, too, sideboarding cards is great if you're doing competitive and taking decks to tournaments, stuff like that. So a little bit differently, a little bit different format. Hopefully going forward, this will be a more a better format for you guys instead of looking at unique examples, because unfortunately there are so many unique cards out there. It's really hard to just kind of pinpoint exact examples. Until this market opens up, we won't really have a good idea of what kind of cards are actually out there. So instead of looking at uniques, I'll just show you guys some cards that I probably would sideboard with this deck. Now let's go ahead and dive into the hero itself. This is Rin Orchid Muna hero. Again, pretty traditional, 2 reserve, 2 in landmarks, but this one a little bit different, right? So when one of your expeditions move forward due to the forest, draw a card, then put a card from your hand in the reserve. So basically you're going to be able to draw and then also resupply, but you're resupplying from your hand. You're going to draw a card, then take a card from your hand and put it into the reserve. So we're doing 2 things at once. We're going through our deck with this hero, and we're also then resupplying our reserve from our hand. So you're drawing cards and then also putting cards into the reserve. Super powerful hero, but the one caveat is you have to advance due to your force, which can be a little tricky, right? There are some obviously expedition zones that specifically have either all 3 or have the forest and the mountains, or the forest and ocean, but then there are some too that don't have forest at all. So sometimes it can be a little tricky to really hit that with your hero and really get the most out of your hero. So what else do we have to do to make sure that we get the most of our abilities? Well, we want to make sure we're also drawing cards with this hero. This pretty much hero says like, hey, I want you to draw cards, and I want to put cards from your deck or from your hand into your reserve. So you got to make sure you're doing all those things. How are we going to accomplish that? Well, what does Muna do really well? It has really good synergy with plants and anchor. Well, what else does it do? It also has a lot of cards that allow your opponent to draw cards, but there's one card in particular, and someone mentioned it in the last video that I did not notice, that is an out-of-faction card that every time your opponent does something, you're going to reap some rewards. So let's go ahead and take a look at the deck that I built for you guys, and let's go ahead and talk about exactly what I'm trying to get through here. The card that I'm talking about is Quetzalcoatl. This is a 3/3. It's an out-of-faction rare. It's a 3/3/3. When an opponent draws 1 or more cards or does a resupply, create or just recruit a 1/1 soldier token in target exposition. Now, a lot of you guys might be seeing that card, maybe like, and I overlooked it. I didn't realize how good this card was. So I really like sat down and said, wait a minute. There are a lot of cards in Muna specifically that actually say, hey, your opponent draws a card. Hey, you and your opponent resupply. You and your opponent do this. And you need to, when I first hear those, I'm like, man, I don't want to give my opponent any advantage. I don't want my opponent drawing cards. I don't want my opponent resupplying or anything like that. But if I have a card on the field that allows me to stick around and create a bunch of tokens while my opponent draws cards, well, now we're talking. So what kind of synergy do we have with that? Let's have some synergy with this card, and let's have some synergy around plants. And let's make sure we are advancing using the Forest Expedition, and let's really reap the most out of our reward for that. So Quetzalcoatl is a really good card. Remember that ability, right? When an opponent draws 1 or more cards or does a resupply, create a 1/1 soldier token. All right, so we got that. 3 copies of that card. Next up, we have 3 copies of Spindle Harvester, a 1/1 For character animal plant, it's a 1/0/0. Again, not the greatest, but it's a 1-drop that also has anchored, and it has that one little force, which can allow you to advance just in the force alone, basically getting that bonus from your hero, then drawing cards and resupplying. It also has anchored, which is something that Muna does really well, which we want to make sure we get the most of. Alright, so we got 3 copies of Spindle Harvester. Next up, 3 cards of another Adefaction rare. This is Ogun. He's a 2/2 for a 2/1/1. Plants you control gain 1 boost. Again, not a bad card. I was iffy on this one putting it in, but I did go with the more plant tradition route. But again, Adefaction rares, you want to usually just keep 1 Adefaction rare in your deck. You don't really want to go with 2, because again, they are out of your faction, so they don't always have the best synergy. But we did go with a more traditional plant route, so I thought this card was needed. Again, you guys can comment down below if you agree or disagree, because I do think I have a little bit too much characters in this deck, so there are, I think, some manipulation that can be done to maybe put some more cards. But again, you guys can let me know down below in the comment section. Next up, we have one of the cards that goes really well with Quetzalcoatl. This is a Kitsune. It's a 2/2 for a 0/3/2, and it says each player draws a card. So 1, you're going to draw a card, and 2, your opponent's going to draw a card. If you have Quetzalcoatl and you drop Kitsune out, well, guess what? Now that your opponent draws a card, you're going to be able to create an Ordris Recruit, a 1/1/1 soldier token in your target expedition. Again, really good card right here. 3 copies of a Kitsune. Again, you're going to be drawing some cards, your opponent's going to be drawing some cards, but you want to make sure you play this card with Quetzalcoatl, allowing you to really reap that reward. If you don't have Quetzalcoatl out and you only have the Kitsune out, again, not a big deal, but just know she does have 0 in the force, so you're not also going to be able to reap the reward from your hero either. Next up, we have one of my personal favorites. This is Sneasel Shroom. It's a 2/2 for a 1/1/1. It says, I gain anchored at noon, gain a boost. Again, I think Sneasel Shroom is pretty much a staple in almost, if not all, of the Muna decks. So again, I really like this card a lot. Pretty good, pretty standard. Next up, we have Kodama. This is where another one I thought was kind of iffy, but I did put it in there because he is a very cost-reduced character. He's a 2/2. He's also a plant spirit. For a 3/3/3, he goes, I gain a sleep. During dusk, ignore my statistics. During rest, I don't go to the reserve and I lose a sleep. It's basically like pseudo anchor, but you gotta let it go another round, or another turn before you really reap the reward for Kodama. Kodama is definitely a good early game play. You drop him down there, you let your opponent advance, then you really set up for some big board plays with Kodama, and also maybe giving him anchor, stuff like that, so you really get to help reap the most reward out of Kodama. Again, another card that I thought could be, cut out of this deck for another card that I'll show you with that I went with a sideboard. You guys can comment down below if you guys agree or disagree. Next up, we have Daughter of Yggdrasil. This is another great card. We have the rare version for a 3/3 5/5/5/3. Again, each player draws a card. Again, Daughter of Yggdrasil and Quetzalcoatl. If you get to 6 mana, you're playing both of these cards. Again, each player draws a card. So you're going to be drawing a card. Your opponent's going to draw a card. If you have Quetzalcoatl out, you're going to also be able to create a Ordris token. And then if you're advancing being forced, which is pretty good, a good chance you can do that with this card with the Daughter of Yggdrasil, then you're also reaping the reward from your hero, drawing cards and putting a card from your hand into your reserve. You can see a little bit of an engine going with this card, right? You can see how the engine works. Early plays with Quetzalcoatl, with Kitsune, Daughter of Yggdrasil. These are all great combo pieces to put together to basically, if you have Quetzalcoatl out and then you have like 5 mana, you have 6 mana. If you have Quetzalcoatl and Kitsune out, you're probably going to play that. Hopefully you're advancing using the force, then you're reaping the reward from your hero, drawing cards, putting a card from your hand into your reserve. A lot of deck manipulation going on here with this deck. It's a pretty powerful deck if it gets going and it goes in the right direction for you. 3 copies of that one. Next up, we have 3 copies of Dracaena. This is a 3/3 for a 0/2/2. That's another dragon plant. That's why I put it in there. I gain anchored at noon. I gain a boost. Again, another card that I think could be target to removal in this deck, especially because I also have the 1 copy of the rare version of Dracaena, so that puts us 3 copies total. 3/3 for a 0/1/1. I gain anchored at noon. I gain 2 boost. Again, a card that I think that can be removed for maybe if you wanted to go with like Sun Wukong, which is a great card. If you kind of reduce these plants, then you probably also want to then reduce Ogun and go with other cards that are rares. Again, these are all cards I think that can be removal or reduced or something like that. Again, if you want to comment down below, go for it. And then last but not least, we have 2 copies of the rare version of the Son of Yggdrasil. Pretty much this is your big win con. It's a 6/6 for a 6/3/3. It has Gigantic and Tough 1. Tough 1, of course, being your opponent's spells and abilities that target me cost 1 more. It also does have the quick action, then target character with a hand cost of 3 or less also gains Anchored. Another reason why I put this in here, because again, if you don't win with Son of Yggdrasil. Maybe you do advance with Son of Yggdrasil and you did advance because of the forest. You're going to reap reward from your hero. Then also to this ability, if you want to then just use the quick action to give something with 3 or less anchored, a good card to target, of course, Quetzalcoatl. You want to anchor Quetzalcoatl as much as possible, then being able to play Kitsune, being able to play the Daughter of Yggdrasil, and then this way constantly reaping the rewards. And again, it's why I said these cards can all be subject to removal, like Dracaena, this one as well, and then also Ogun as well. I do think Ogun is a pretty good card in this deck because we do have a lot of plants. You have the Spindle Harvesters, you have the Sneezer Shrooms, you also have the Dracaenas, Kodama, Daughter of Yggdrasil, Son of Yggdrasil. These are all plants, so they all do target really well. Again, if you get Quetzalcoatl out early and with all the other cards with Kitsune, I do think that's the direction you want to go. But if you're someone, who wants a secondary win con in this deck, I do think Ogun is necessary to keep in there. Again, you guys can let me know down below in the comment section. For the spells, we have 3 copies of Beauty Sleep. Target character gains a sleep. This is a great card to also target yourself, but also to target your opponent. So if you have, like, let's say, for example, only 1 card facing Son of Yggdrasil, maybe you want to just put another card across from you, asleep, being your opponent's card. At least you're going to have 1 turn of dancing with the Son of Yggdrasil, something like that. Again, so I went with 3 copies. Again, I think it's a decent card. It's also like the only type of pseudo removal we have in this deck other than Mana Reaping, but I don't like that card because I don't like giving my opponent the ability to ramp. If it's already a ramp deck, you're going to really super ramp your opponent, so that's the reason why I went with Beauty Sleep, not the other one. Next up, we have 3 copies of Meditation Training. It's a 2/3. Target character with hand cost of 3 or less gains anchored. Again, you want to target Quetzalcoatl or Ogun at the very least. If they don't have anchor and you want to target these guys so then your other plants get boost, great. If you want to target Quetzalcoatl, which makes the most sense, and you have Kitsune and Daughter of Yggdrasil, even better. Like, that's really the way you want to go. And then we have 3 copies of Nurture because, again, why not? It's a 2/1 for up to 2 target characters, each gain 1 boost. Pretty good there. For the permanents, we have 3 copies of Bountiful Meadow. It's a 2/2. The next plant you play this turn costs 1 less. We have a lot of plants, so we might as well go with that. And then, of course, we have 2 copies of the Spindle Moon of Bastion. It's a 3/3. Characters you control have tough 2. That's the deck itself right there, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the statistics of this deck. Because it's pretty good, I think. 54 Forest, 56 Mountain, 47 Ocean. A lot of you guys might be saying, nah, that Forest is pretty weak. Just remember, too, we have a lot of cards that boost themselves, and we also have like the cards like Nurture that will also give you boost. If you also get Quetzalcoatl out, you're also going to be boosting that up by 1/1/1 across the board. So I think it's a pretty good, even balanced deck. 54, 56, 47 in Ocean. That's the one area you may struggle getting across. For hand cost and reserve cost, it's pretty balanced, right? Highs on the 2s, good on the 1s and the 3s, and only the 6 being the Son of Yggdrasil. For your reserve cost, it's pretty much the other way around, right? We got 1s, 2s, and 3s, so pretty good there. I think this is a pretty good, well-balanced deck. 9 spells, 5 permanents, 25 characters. That's the deck itself. Again, you guys can let me know what you guys think. You guys think maybe we should reduce the characters a little bit. Maybe we should switch some characters out. Maybe go a little more heavier on the permanents. Maybe a little more heavier on the spells. What would you guys do differently? And if so, why? Please comment down below. Would love to hear from some of you guys. Now we're going ahead and shift over to cards that you probably might want to sideboard. For the cards that you want to sideboard, I have 10 cards here that are good examples of cards that I probably would sideboard. They're all characters. Again, you guys can let me know if you guys agree or disagree with any of these as well. For the first up we have for the sideboard, we have a rare version of the Verdamback. It's a 3/3. It is a plant. It's a 4/4/5, and it has I have Defender unless you control 2 or more other plants. My expedition can advance during dusk. So in other words, you have to basically remove that defender. So you have to have more than 1 plant on the field with Verdamback in order to advance. I do like this card because it is a 3/3, but it has really good stats at a 3. The rare version, pretty good, pretty solid. The not so rare version is a 4/4. I think a 5/5/6 if I'm not correct. So you get a little bit of a reduced reduction cost on the mana there, but you also get a reduction cost in statistics as well. So maybe if you want to go with the regular version as well, I can totally see that as well. Next up, I also have 3 copies of Youngsu Verdant Weaver. It's a 3/3 for a 3 across the board, and if you control 2 or more plants, I gain 2 boosts. This may be another direction instead of Verdamback. Maybe you want to swap in and maybe go with Youngsu Verdant Weaver. Maybe you take out Dracaena, maybe you take out Kodama, and maybe you slip in 3 copies of this guy as well. Or maybe you get rid of Ogun altogether and you go with 3 copies of this one, and maybe you up the rares of some other cards that you had. All great suggestions as well. Again, comment down below. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but I do like the idea if you have 2 more plants, you gain 2 boosts. So, I mean, it doesn't have Defender, so, and there's a lot of plants in this deck, so definitely something that you can look at. The other card that if you were to get rid of Ogun, maybe this is a card that you would play with, is Muna Druid. It's a 3/2 for a 2/1/1. Up to one target plant gains 2 boosts. Now this one I definitely went back and forth on for 2 reasons. Ogun, at least when you play him, all your plants gain a boost, but if you play this guy, he's a 3/2 for a 2/1/1 and will give target plant 2 boosts. I also like this quick action. Target character with a hand cost of 3 or less gains anchor. So if you don't have a reason to play him out of the reserve, maybe you just use that anchored ability. Maybe you play Quetzalcoatl and give him anchored. Stuff like that could really go a long way. This is the one card I was like, I really don't know if I should put this one in here. I kind of went back and forth with Ogun. And then last but not least, this one's a little bit of an interesting card. I think this card does deserve at least an honorable mention. This is Loki. He's a 7/5 for a 5/5/5. Each player discards their hand, then draws 3 cards. This card can definitely ruin your opponent if they're also drawing cards with you. If you have him with Quetzalcoatl, unlikely, but if you get into that type of point of the game, maybe you have anchored with Quetzalcoatl and you kept him around the board and you protected him, and then maybe you have Loki with 7 mana you just want to drop. You're going to gain the benefit from Quetzalcoatl, so you're going to create something, and then he is a big body for a 7/5, and then if you get him out of your reserve, playing him for 5 out of 5/5/5, and then again, I think it's at least worth an honorable mention at the very least. You guys can let me know if you guys agree or disagree. At the very least, I thought it was kind of cheeky to put him in there too, because it would be a fun card to play against. But that's going to do it for me. That's going to do it for this deck as well. Let me know what you guys think. We are finally done with Muna. We're going to now shift our focus over to Yasmir. We're going to build some fun and interesting decks over with Yasmir. Let me know what you guys think of the actual build that I have here. You guys think I should probably reduce the characters a little bit, because that was one thing also I noticed, that I might have a little too much characters in here, and maybe we should get rid of like an Ogun or something. And I don't know, you guys, maybe a Dracaena, maybe the rare version of a Dracaena, and the rares of Oguns might be axed here. Maybe you want to go with some rares of like a Meditation or a Nurture. All those would be open suggestions that you guys can comment down below. Other than that, I think this deck is pretty good. I think it is a decent build. Definitely, I like the plant route, but man, this Quetzalcoatl is something I definitely overlooked. I did not think it was that good. But man, for Muna, it is really good, because there are a lot of cards that make both you and your opponent draw some cards, and if you can do that, man, you can have a fun time really wrecking your opponent, because of course your opponent gets to draw cards, and if they do that, plus there's a lot of decks in general that do that, right? They resupply, they draw cards, so he's a great card to slip into Muna. Definitely a good out-of-faction rare, definitely something I overlooked, and probably would go in the other deck that I built previously as well. But that's gonna do it for me. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. As always, please hit that like button if for nothing else, comment down below, subscribe if you're new, and as always, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next time.